Try to imagine nothing. Absolute nothing. No air, no light, no particles, no material of any kind. Just pure emptiness. You can't do it. I mean, you think you can. You picture blackness, you picture a void. But even that blackness is still something. Even when you imagine empty space, you're imagining space, and space turns out to be very much something. This is where it gets weird. This is where your intuition completely breaks. So here's the question. What's between the atoms? You learned in school that everything is made of atoms. Fine. And you probably picture them like little balls, little solid spheres packed together to make stuff. But they're not packed together. They're not even close to one another. There's space between them, enormous amounts of space relative to their size. And what fills that space? Most people say nothing, empty void. The atoms are the stuff, and between them is just absence, just distance, just nothing waiting for something to happen. Wrong. Completely wrong. Between every atom in your body, between every atom in this room, between every atom everywhere, something exists, something real, something physical, something that carries energy and exerts force and holds the entire universe together. Let me show you what I mean. Put your hand on a table. Go ahead, actually do it if there's a table nearby. You feel that? Solid, hard. Your hand stops, the table stops. It seems like the most basic thing in the world. But your hand never touched that table. The atoms in your hand never made contact with the atoms in the table, not even close. See, the outer edge of every atom is surrounded by electrons, little negative charges buzzing around the nucleus. And when your hand gets close to the table, the electrons in your hand approach the electrons in the table. Negative approaching negative, same charge. And what do same charges do? They repel. They push each other away. They absolutely refuse to occupy the same space. So what you feel when you touch that table, that sensation of solidity, that pressure, that stop, it's not atoms hitting atoms. It's electrical repulsion, fields pushing against fields, the electrons in your hand getting close enough to the electrons in the table that their electric fields start shouting at each other. No, 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 you can't come here. Go back. This space is taken. And your brain interprets that electromagnetic repulsion as touch, as solid, as contact. But there's a gap. There's always a gap. Your atoms and the table's atoms never meet. They never make contact. They're always separated by this invisible cushion of electric force. You're floating right now. Did you know that? You're not actually sitting on your chair. You're hovering above it, supported by electromagnetic repulsion, floating on an invisible cushion of force. You've been floating your whole life. Every time you thought you touched something, you were hovering just above it. Now think about what this means for the question we started with. What's between the atoms? Field, electric field, electromagnetic field. And these fields are not nothing. People make this mistake all the time. They think fields are just a mathematical convenience, a way of calculating things, a shortcut. No, the field is there. It exists in space. It carries energy. It has momentum. It does things. Every charged particle, every electron, every proton creates an electric field that extends outward in all directions, not just nearby, all the way out, getting weaker with distance, but never quite reaching zero. In principle, the electric field from an electron in your fingertip reaches across the entire universe. So atoms aren't isolated little balls floating in nothing. They're the centers of these fields that spread outward and overlap and interact. The space between atoms is filled with field, layer upon layer of electromagnetic influence. When you look at matter, when you look at solid stuff, what you're really seeing is a dense mesh of overlapping fields, electrons repelling electrons, creating the impression of solidity through pure electromagnetic force. The stuff isn't the atoms, the stuff is the field.
The atoms are just the places where the fields get intense, where the action concentrates. But the fields themselves extend everywhere between every atom in your body. Right now, fields are pushing and pulling, maintaining structure, holding molecules together, keeping you from collapsing or flying apart. Chemical bonds, the things that hold atoms together into molecules, are electromagnetic fields doing work. The structure of matter is field structure. So already the answer to what's between the atoms is not nothing. It's field. It's electromagnetic influence. It's the invisible fabric that makes touching possible by making it impossible. You never touch anything precisely because there's something between you and everything else, and that something is the field. But here's where it gets even stranger. We've established that the space between atoms is filled with fields, electromagnetic fields reaching out from every charged particle, overlapping and interacting, creating the invisible fabric that holds everything together. But that's not the whole story. That's not even the weird part yet. Let me ask you something. What happens if you remove all the atoms? Not just some of them, all of them. You take a region of space and pump out every single particle of matter, every atom, every molecule, every speck of dust. You create the most perfect vacuum possible. Now what's there? Nothing, right? That's what vacuum means. That's what empty means. You took everything out, so nothing remains. So here's the thing. Physics says you're wrong. Nature absolutely refuses to be empty. The universe will not allow true nothingness to exist anywhere, ever, under any circumstances. This comes from quantum mechanics, from something called the uncertainty principle. And look, most people have heard of the uncertainty principle, but they think it's about measurement, about how observing things changes them. That's part of it, but there's something deeper. The uncertainty principle says certain pairs of properties cannot both be exactly determined at the same time, position and momentum. You can't know both precisely, but also, and this is the important part, energy and time. You cannot have a region of space with exactly zero energy for an extended period of time. It's forbidden. The mathematics won't allow it. Perfect emptiness would require perfect precision, exactly zero energy. And quantum mechanics says, no, you don't get that kind of precision. Nature doesn't work that way. So what happens instead? The vacuum fluctuates. Even with nothing in it, even with every particle removed, space itself is restless. It trembles. It can't hold still. Pairs of particles appear out of nowhere, literally out of nothing. A particle and its antiparticle, an electron and a positron, a quark and an antiquark. They exist for an incredibly brief moment, so short you almost can't define it. And then they find each other, annihilate, and vanish, gone like they were never there. Virtual particles, they're called. Virtual because you can't catch them. You can't trap them in a jar and study them. They exist too briefly. But they're real. They have effects, measurable effects. So now you're asking, wait, where does the energy come from? You can't make particles out of nothing. That violates conservation of energy. Something can't come from nothing. Good question. Really good question.
But here's how nature handles it. The uncertainty principle allows you to borrow energy from nowhere as long as you pay it back fast enough. The shorter the loan, the more you can borrow. Virtual particles pop into existence on borrowed energy, exist for a fleeting instant, then annihilate and pay back the debt before the universe notices. It's like taking money from a cash register, buying something, then returning it and putting the money back before anyone checks the books. As long as everything balances at the end, it's allowed. Nature runs on credit at the quantum scale, constant borrowing and repaying, everywhere, all the time. And this isn't theoretical speculation. This isn't physicists playing mathematical games. We can measure this. There's an experiment called the Casimir effect that shows empty space isn't empty. You take two metal plates, very thin, very flat, and you put them incredibly close together in a vacuum, almost touching, but not quite. Tiny gap between them. And they attract, they pull toward each other. Not gravity, that's far too weak at this scale. Not static electricity, nothing's charged. The plates are neutral. The space between them is empty. There's no obvious reason for them to move, but they do. They pull together, squeezed by nothing, pushed by empty space itself. So why? Virtual particles have wavelengths, like waves in the ocean, different sizes of oscillation. When the plates are very close, some wavelengths don't fit between them. Those virtual particles can't pop into existence in that gap because there's no room for their wavelength. So you get fewer virtual particles between the plates than outside them. More quantum activity outside, less inside. That imbalance creates pressure, more pushing in than pushing out. The plates move together. This has been measured precisely. The force matches exactly what quantum mechanics predicts. Empty space exerts pressure. The vacuum pushes things around. Now, think about what this means for our question. What's between the atoms? Fields, yes, but those fields aren't just sitting there quietly. The space between atoms, that space filled with electromagnetic fields, is also churning with virtual particles, appearing, disappearing, borrowing energy, paying it back billions of times per second. The emptiness inside matter is not empty. It's the busiest place you can imagine. Creation and destruction happening constantly at scales too small and too fast to directly observe. And this is true everywhere, not just between atoms in your body. The space between here and the moon, between stars, between galaxies, same thing. Virtual particles flickering in and out, the vacuum seething with activity. There is no quiet place in the universe. There is no spot where truly nothing happens. You cannot find emptiness. Nowhere in the cosmos does actual nothing exist. Physics won't allow it. Though the vacuum churns with virtual particles, the space between atoms buzzes with fields and quantum fluctuations. Emptiness, true emptiness, doesn't exist anywhere. Now, let's put this all together and see what it really means. People think about the vacuum as absence, the default state, what's left when you remove all the interesting stuff, the boring background where things happen. But that's completely backward. The vacuum isn't absence, it's foundation. It's not what remains when you take everything away, it's what everything comes out of. The vacuum is the ground state of reality, the quietest possible configuration of the fields that fill all of space. And even that quietest state cannot be perfectly still. So here's the part that really twists your brain. Particles aren't stuff that exists in empty space. Particles are the fields doing something. A particle is just a ripple in a field, an excitation, a place where the field vibrates a little harder than the quiet background hum. The electron isn't a little ball sitting in the electromagnetic field. The electron is the electromagnetic field bunched up, concentrated, doing something more intense than usual. And those fields exist everywhere, not just where particles are, everywhere. The whole universe is filled with fields overlapping, extending through all of space, and particles are just places where those fields get excited. And think about what this means for you, for what you are. You're made of atoms. Those atoms are mostly empty space, but that empty space is filled with fields, and those fields are fluctuating with virtual particles. And the particles themselves, the electrons and quarks that seem so solid, they're just excitations in deeper fields. There's no bottom, there's no foundation, there's no solid stuff that everything else is made of. You zoom in looking for the ultimate substance, and the bedrock of reality keeps dissolving. Atoms are mostly empty. The empty is full of field. The fields are full of fluctuations. The particles are made of field excitations, fields all the way down. So it's like looking for the bottom of a lake and discovering the lake has no bottom, just water all the way down, getting stranger and darker the deeper you go, but never hitting rock. At some point, you have to accept there is no rock. There's just process, just activity, just things happening. The universe isn't made of stuff, it's made of happening. Matter isn't substance sitting in empty space. Matter is space doing something, a different configuration of the same fields that make up the vacuum. You and the empty space next to you are made of the same thing, the same field, the same quantum foundation. You're just arranged differently. You're a pattern that persists, a ripple that keeps going, a fluctuation that got complicated enough to wonder what it's made of. And here's something else. Those fields connect everything. The electromagnetic field in your body is the same field as the electromagnetic field in a star billions of light years away. Same field, not a copy, not a similar field, the same continuous field extending through all of space. Particles are just places where that universal field does something interesting. Between those places, the field continues, quieter but still present. You're not separate from the universe. You can't be. You're a localized pattern in fields that have no edges, that extend everywhere, that connect everything to everything else. So, back to our question. What's between the atoms? Real physical fields that carry energy and exert forces, virtual particles bubbling up from the quantum vacuum, activity that never stops, fluctuation that never rests, potential that fills every point in space. Not nothing, never nothing. The space between atoms is the same stuff as the atoms themselves, just in a quieter state. When you reach out and touch something, you don't cross empty distance. You push through fields. Your fields interact with other fields. Electromagnetic repulsion creates the sensation of contact, but there's no emptiness to cross. It's fields all the way. The solid world you think you live in, the empty space you think surrounds it, these are both the same thing. Both are field. The difference is just intensity, just pattern, just how much activity is happening where. And when it finally clicks, when it really sinks in, reality looks different. The world stops being solid objects in empty space. It starts being what it actually is, a web of interacting fields, patterns emerging and dissolving, activity that never stops, no hard edges anywhere, no true emptiness anywhere. Everything connected to everything by the very medium it's made of. You're made of that, a brief, complicated ripple in fields that were here before you and will be here after. The space inside you and the space between galaxies is the same space, made of the same fields doing the same things. The only difference is the pattern. That's the answer. That's what's between the atom. Not nothing, some something that turns out to be the same something that atoms themselves are made of. There is no between, really. There's just field everywhere in various states of excitation, and what we call matter is just the excited parts. So, can you imagine nothing now? True nothing, absolute emptiness. You can't, and now you know why. Because nothing doesn't exist. Never did. The universe is incapable of emptiness. Even the quietest, most remote, most vacant corner of space churns with activity, buzzes with potential, refuses to be still. Reality isn't stuff and void. Reality is field. The field is everywhere, and everywhere always something is happening. That's what's between the atoms. That's what's between everything. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The solid world dissolves into shimmering activity, and emptiness reveals itself as the busiest place of all.